Okay. Micah Goodman is discussing, just to refresh our memory, that Moshe's farewell speech is his key focus in this book. And it's given as Bnei Israel are about to enter the promised land. And the fear we focused upon last week was that of power corrupting leaders. Today, the focus is on fashioning a society that will stand up and defy the dangers of power. Now, when I chose to explore this book, I, of course, had no idea that we'd be in the midst of a war. In the midst of an opportunity for Israeli and Jewish society to show what it is made of. Now, actually, as I say that, I realize I don't like the way that sounds, because we have many opportunities to project the Jewish values that we possess. And it shouldn't take a war or anti-Semitism to awaken that Jewishness within us. As Rachel Sharansky Danziger, daughter of Natan, friend of the Solomons, says, we Jews and Israelis are so much more than the targets of anti-Semitism. We stand together in kindness, dignity, and shared purpose. Now, I'm going to allow Rachel to introduce our speaker today, for it is the perfect introduction to Micah's description of Moshe's vision of biblical and contemporary Jewish and ultimately universal society. And then I will share specific examples of what has been going on this week, reflecting that vision. And then we will return to Sefer Dvarim, Deuteronomy, and Moshe's words in the fifth book. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. This was in an article just a couple of days ago, I believe. She says, as Jews, we all share membership in what Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik called the covenant of fate. It has been our fate as Jews to be targeted and hated. This past month showed us that we cannot outrun this fate by creating our own state or by living in liberal democracies. But the covenant of fate is only half the story. we all have another covenant open to us. The covenant which Rabbi Soloveitchik called the covenant of destiny. Destiny, unlike fate, implies destination, a sense of purpose. And unlike the covenant of faith, this is a covenant that we, all of us who are Jewish or Israeli, have to choose to join. In the 30 days that have passed since October 7th, we've been choosing to do exactly that. We chose and choose to help each other. When I walk down the street these days, I witness local teenagers babysitting the children of the evacuees and women carrying meals to the families of reservists. I run into neighbors who had disappeared for a day only to come back suntanned and somewhat stiff, full of stories about harvesting zucchini in some stranger's field. I spot friends from abroad who flew in to show support and volunteer here. And when I get home, my kids ask me, so who will help today? We chose and choose to embrace our values and stand up for them. Synagogues everywhere have been organizing one event after another, bringing us together to learn, heal, and draw strength from the legacy we share. Artists and public intellectuals have been putting out podcasts and free Zoom sessions, drawing upon history and art to help us envision possible futures. My American friends send me pictures from their Stand with Israel rallies, and I know you've been doing the same, where they dare to stand tall in the face of jeering crowds filled with pride in their Jewish identity. Now, an expression that has become very prominent here is Yozma Ezrachit, citizens' initiative. So many. And this is the essence of Moshe's farewell address. He is not putting the responsibility just on the future leaders, but on the entire society. Perhaps because he doesn't have faith in leaders, and we won't go there now, but wants every citizen involved. And that's what has happened here over this last month. Now, what I want us to do is to first look at these 3 WhatsApp messages, 3 of many that I receive every day from my shul. Now, you won't, I don't think, be able to really read them, but they're from my shul called Kehilat Klausner. It's housed in a school that's a 4-minute walk from our home. And this one is about the funeral that's taking place tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock for a lone soldier. Rose Lubin moved here from Atlanta, Georgia 2 years ago. She enlisted and was in the police force. And a couple of days ago, she was on duty outside the old city, actually, and was killed. So this message is asking us, as many people, to attend. Her parents We're only arriving today from Atlanta. And it's also saying where the shiva will be and where donations can be given. And one of her cousins is a member of the shul. So that's one type. And normally, this will be at Mount Herzl, thousands attend. We don't know her, but thousands, I'm sure, will be there. Another type of message. Many of you will be familiar with the Liberty Bell Park. Near there is the Don Boutique Hotel, which is housing 300 families from the South. And what this is asking for, again, I'm sorry it's not clear, but there are 12 children there who were born in November. And it's asking for us to deliver to an address balloons and toys, and to donate for some entertainment so that they'll have a collective birthday party. It's also asking for us to bake cakes for Shabbat. And one final example, though these are only 3 of many, maybe you can see fruits and vegetables here, that to support farmers, that if we order by tomorrow afternoon, on Friday, they will deliver not too far from here, if we order and purchase, so that they're having some kind of an income, fruits and vegetables.
Oh, I want that.
All right, I'll give you the information later, Zipporah.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, I'm going to ask Daniel to share with us 3 clips. Clip number 1 might be a surprising group of volunteers. I guess I'll stop sharing for the moment. But that's what these situations bring out. So Daniel, please, clip number 1.
כל הכבוד עם ישראל, כל הכבוד. כל הכבוד חבר'ה. כל הכבוד. ברוכים הבאים לכולם. אהלן. ברוכים הבאים. חבר'ה.
Bikers.
כל הכבוד חברים. אין על עם ישראל. ממש. תסתכל, נותנים את הלב, את הנשמה. אנחנו ננצח, נעבור את הכל. אין על עם ישראל. כל הכבוד חבר'ה. כל הכבוד, כל הכבוד. ברוכים הבאים.
So these were bikers who were just on their way, as bikers do, and they came across a field and saw that there were only 2 people in the fields. And so now, this entire month, they have made it a habit of going to a variety of fields and helping in the fields, harvesting. Now, we go from that to what's going to be not graphic, but worse perhaps than graphic. Imagining a father believing that his 8-year-old, who was kidnapped, and hearing that actually she was dead, and being happy to hear that, and then finding out that she's not. Daniel, clip number 2.
Right.
They just said, we found Emily. She's dead. And I went, yes! I went, yes, and smiled. Because that is the best news of the possibilities that I knew. That was the best possibility that I was hoping for.
And we actually spoke with one man, originally from Ireland, who was separated from his 8-year-old daughter. She had gone to a sleepover at a friend's house who also lived in the kibbutz. And he described to us the agonizing moment after 2 days of waiting for answers. He was rescued. He finally found out that his 8-year-old daughter, Emily, had been killed.
She was either dead or in Gaza. And if you know anything about what they do to people in Gaza, that is worse than death. That is worse than death. The way they treat you. They'd have no food, they'd have no water. She'd be in a dark room filled with Christ knows how many people and terrified every minute, hour, day and possible years to come. So death was a blessing, an absolute blessing.
Now, when we talk about society, all of these families of these hostages are being cared for, not left alone for a moment, And then there are moments of hope. Kibbutz Be'eri saw over 100 people be murdered and over 24 hostages. On Sunday, the following happened. We will see in clip number 3 that many soldiers are gathered in a synagogue. It is a secular kibbutz, and there is a woman named Rachel Pricker. Her house was destroyed, and she had to leave. She is considered the Gabait of the synagogue, and soldiers who were stationed there found her, knowing that she has the key, and asked if they could break down the door of the key because they didn't want her to come back. And she said, of course. And they would sleep in there. And on Sunday, she came back for the first time. And look at what she participated in. Clip number 3.
בארי ביום כ"א בשבט, שזה בדיוק 30 יום בשמחת תורה, עם רחל היקרה הקימה את בית הכנסת לפני כמה שנים, 17 שנה, ורחל מזכירה את מרים הנביאה. מרים, כשיצאו עם ישראל ממצרים, לקחה מרים את עטוף. מסבירים המפרשים למה עטוף ימי הידיעה. היא ידעה שיום אחד כולנו נצא מעבדות לחירות,
So they are beginning to rewrite a new Torah that will be ready for next Simchat Torah, Bezrat Hashem. And she is going to write the first word, Breshit.
שבסייעתא דשמיא ייכנס בעוד 12 חודשים, מכיוון שאנחנו שנה מעוברת, ייכנס בערב חג מתן תורה כאן לקיבוץ בסייעתא דשמיא.
עם ישראל חי, עם ישראל חי, עם ישראל, עם ישראל, עם ישראל חי, עם ישראל חי, עם ישראל חי, עם ישראל, עם ישראל, 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 עם ישראל חי.
בית הכנסת, ואנחנו מתחילים את העוד ב', ישלים אותו גם כן אחר כך הרב אילון. את אמרת שעם הקהל הזה, בטוח שבהכנסת ספר תורה בעוד 12 חודשים, כל עם ישראל יהיו איתך.
בראשית זה בארי, תסתכל על האותיות. נכון. עכשיו אני מסתכלת על זה.
שת בארי, מחזיר את בארי.
הרי אני
כותבת אות
בספר תורה, לשם קדושת ספר תורה. תהיה גאולה. אנחנו נמצאים כאן בקיבוץ בארי, יחד עם החיילים היקרים של זק"א, שהם מוסרים נפש בכל יום ובכל רגע.
יחד עם כל הלוחמים.
בעזרת השם נכתוב את האותיות, גאולה תהיה בעזרת השם.
אמן.
בעזרת השם יהיה גאולה גדולה לכל עם ישראל. חיים של שלווה ושמחה של המשפחות שלכם. שיהיה רק טוב בעם ישראל. טוב מאוד בספר תורה. תזכו את זה, פתחו לנו שערי שמיים. שמירה והצלחה. שערי ניצחון גדול לעם ישראל בעזרת השם.
So the men in the yellow vests are from Zaka. Amazing individuals who have the holy task of, after people have been murdered, going around making sure to collect body parts. Now, what Rachel Pricker says there, as she's writing the word Breshit, is Be'eri. The word Be'eri is in the word Breshit. And so Be'eri will rise again from Breshit. Amen. Amen. Okay. So I will share my screen again. So Moshe realizes that the Israelites are moving from weakness that they have known in Egypt to a position of strength. And he is confident that they will succeed. But he fears that with that success will come some negative traits. And just as we said in the first week, Micah Goodman really believes that Moshe, in writing about biblical times, was writing about contemporary times. And he even says about Moshe's concern about coming into our own land in ancient times is very similar to Zionism. It was easy, and this takes us back to our earlier discussion. It was easy for Bnei Israel, when they were weak, and not sovereign to be moral. Just as some of the European Jewish thinkers were scared to move to Palestine because they were scared that we would have to get our hands dirty if we were sovereign. And they didn't want that. And Micah realizes, but he says it's worth the risk. Because that's what the Torah wants for us to not live in a china cabinet and not just to apply the laws as individuals, but so much of the laws is living as a nation. So yes, there are going to be dilemmas. And Micah believes that Moshe said what we're going to see now, that if you really study the Torah, not just the leader, as we said last week, but the people, every one of them, because it's not just an elite that should study, that you'll glean from it appropriate values. So, Micah says the following: Moses believes that there is a way to fashion a society that will not translate economic and military success into excessive national pride. What is the core of an education that safeguards against power? Moses is not worried that the people may lose the war. He knows that they will win. And that is what seems to worry him, says Micah, that victory will confound their moral and spiritual consciousness. And so he works to cultivate a national moral sensibility. So what does Moshe do? Moshe tells a story, but how? Now, note, as I'm reading the psukim, the verses, how this is different, Micah points out, than Plato's The Republic. Because what does Plato do? He says each nation should feel that they are born out of the earth that they're on. Micah gets into that. Again, he says, a nation lives on a certain piece of earth, and they should feel that that's where they belong. Okay? Now, as I read these psukim, you tell me the difference between Plato's theory and what Moshe says. And it will be when you come into the land which the Lord your God gives you for an inheritance, and you possess it and settle in it, that you shall take the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you will bring from your land, which the Lord your God is giving you. And you shall put them into a basket and go to the place which the Lord your God will choose to have his name dwell there. And you shall come to the Kohen who will be serving in those days and say to him, I declare this day to the Lord your God that I have come to the land which the Lord swore to our forefathers to give us. And the Kohen will take the basket from your hand, laying it before the altar of the Lord your God. And you shall call out and say before the Lord your God, and Arameans sought to destroy my forefather, and he went down to Egypt and sojourned there with a small number of people, and there he became a great, mighty, and numerous nation. And the Egyptians treated us cruelly and afflicted us, and they imposed hard labor upon us. So we cried out to the Lord, God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil and our oppression. And the Lord brought us out from Egypt with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm, with great awe and with signs and wonders. And he brought us to this place, and he gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So how is this different from Plato?
God.
Linda, what?
God.
What about God?
Well, they realize that it's thanks to God, that it isn't just about them.
Okay, that's another point that's important. But what else? Something.
But God owns the land.
You're both right, but I'm looking for something
I think
simpler.
Bracha, I think Plato is talking about it's where you are born or where you live.
Yes.
And it's like they consider that whether it's their native land or not, that's what creates them. Whereas here it says, this is not the case, that you belong to a different place.
What word do we have twice? You're right, Brenda.
The land that God has given to us, this land of milk and honey, that we should take you out of Egypt.
And if you go out from somewhere, where do you have to? You have to go
to the land that God has promised.
T-O, right? So that you're right, unlike, natives, that it's indigenous, B'nai Israel, there's a lesson to be taught that you were somewhere and you were slaves somewhere. And right, Linda, God took you out of there and he's bringing you to somewhere. Now, you're coming to somewhere. Now, what's the point of that? Why is that important? That you be aware that you weren't always there.
You're creating a society to honor God and thanking him for or her for the gifts that you have.
Okay, so that's going back to what Linda and Bev said in being appreciative to God. Okay, don't take it for granted. Okay, anybody else?
I would also say, I think the journey is also important, that you're moving from one place to another, and that movement is a movement towards a more moral society.
Okay, all right, I would put all of that together. Now, what is the objective of this storytelling that's going on here? And we know that storytelling is so crucial to our tradition. What is the objective of this storytelling?
Bracha, I think that Moses is trying to tell a story and one that will be repeated, and we know that it is because we see this in the Haggadah every year,
right?
That will remind people that you didn't always have it as easy and comfortable as you have it now, and you always have to keep in mind your history.
Exactly. In one word, memory. Memory is very, very important to us, and not just for the sake of remembering, but for constructive reasons. Exactly. Thank you. Okay, and Micah in this book talks about 3 types of memory because he is trying to create a certain type of society. And as we said, his fear is that perhaps when we are perhaps feeling too good about ourselves, that maybe we have to balance it. So first, he says, in order to overcome temptation to oppress a stranger, we must remember our own experience of being strangers. And Marlene mentions that, in the Haggadah, we certainly read that, but we don't leave it just till Pesach, but we think about that every week. Second, in order to prevent victory from turning into, we must remember our period of dependence on God in the wilderness. When we are successful, we should remember that there was a time, the 40 years, that we were fully dependent on God when he gave us that manna. And when we're feeling down, we should also remember that we can depend on God. So you can choose your times. And then also, sometimes a person can feel so self-righteous. And obviously, Micah goes into this in great detail. In order to resist an attitude of moral superiority, we must remember our past sins. And that is why it's so important, as he said, for a leader last week, to constantly be rereading and taking his copy of the Torah with him. No one should feel that they don't have to restudy, knows it all. No one. Now, an entire society has to study. We were never one to believe that it's just an elite. Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, at an appointed time in the festival of Sukkot, after the year of release. Well, this obviously changed, and we believe that every Shabbat and Mondays and Thursdays we read from the Torah, not to mention those who study every day. When all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God in the place he will choose, you shall read this Torah before all Israel in their ears. Assemble the people, the men, the women. The rabbis obviously forgot about that. The women and the children and your stranger in your cities, in order that they hear and in order that they learn and fear the Lord your God, and they will observe to do all the words of the Torah. So what that is, first of all, a society, no different classes. That's a pun on the word classes, but literally everyone is meant to learn. And if you have everybody learning, everybody can then question and be a part of it. Now, and their children who did not know will hear and learn to fear the Lord your God all the days that you live on the land to which you are crossing the Jordan to possess. Now, and what, for example, will you learn to help create the kind of society that Moshe is envisioning and hoping for. So, and you shall turn that money into whatever your soul desires, cattle, sheep, new wine or old wine, or whatever your soul desires. And you shall eat there before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. And as for the Levite who is in your cities, you shall not forsake him, for he has neither portion nor inheritance with you. And then it goes on, and you shall perform the festival of weeks, Shavuot, to the Lord your God, the donation you can afford to give according to how the Lord your God shall bless you. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your son and your daughter, and your manservant and your maidservant, and the Levite who is within your cities, and the stranger and the orphan and the widow who are among you in the place which the Lord your God will choose to establish his name therein. And you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and you shall keep and perform these statutes. You shall make yourself the festival of Sukkot for 7 days, when you gather in the produce from your threshing floor and your vat. And you shall rejoice in your festival, you, your son, your daughter, and your manservant, and your maidservant, and the Levite, and the stranger, and the orphan, and the widow who are within your cities. So, what do we learn? Joy is associated with what? Give me one word. In these verses, joy is associated with what?
Doing mitzvot.
Generosity. Generosity. Okay? You feel the joy and you put it into action, whether it's the Levite or your servants, the stranger, the orphan, the widow. That's creating a society that is fostering social consciousness. Now tell me another day in our year that fosters social consciousness. Anyone?
Helping the poor.
No, I'm looking for, Sarah, a specific day. We mentioned Sukkot.
Oh.
Purim. Purim.
Okay, Purim, yes.
They have to get
The
poor.
mitzvot, matanot, evyonim, mishloch manot. What's another day?
Yom Kippur,
How?
because you're praying as a community. It's for everybody.
Shabbat.
You're all hate. It's for that all of us.
Okay, Frida. Yes, and I heard somebody else.
Pesach.
Yeah, Pesach.
Pesach, yes. Yes, we're thinking of how we were slaves and we will not inflict that upon somebody else. I think I heard somebody else say what I'm looking for.
Shabbat.
Shabbat. Yes. That should have been the first, but it's because it happens every week that we don't think of it. Okay, now, Shabbat in Shmot and in Dvarim. Remember last week or 2 weeks ago, we said that Moshe created a religious revolution in Dvarim. Remember we said that he tried to minimize the sacrifices. Keep that in mind, as I want you to see the difference between Shabbat mentioned in Shmot, Exodus, and Shabbat in Dvarim, Deuteronomy. He is more concerned not with rituals, certainly not with sacrifice, but he is more concerned with this phrase I've used now twice in the last moment, social consciousness. So in Exodus, it says, now you got to pay close attention, very close attention. Remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. 6 days may you work and perform all your labor. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall perform no labor, neither you, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, your beast, nor your stranger who is in your cities. Keep the Sabbath day. We're in Deuteronomy now. Keep the Sabbath day to sanctify it as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days may you work and perform all your labor. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall perform no labor, neither you, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, your ox, your donkey, any of your livestock, nor your stranger who is within your cities, in order that your manservant and your maidservant may rest like you. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord your God took you out from there with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm, and therefore the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. What is the difference? The key difference between the Exodus law regarding Shabbat and the one in Deuteronomy. Anybody catch it?
The Deuteronomy, he really expands this idea of social consciousness. And he says, he gives a reason. He says that you will not have anyone working, not your animals, your strangers, so they can rest like you.
Exactly, Michael. In the first one, it just talks about, all right, not working. But here he makes it absolutely clear that just like you, they're also, all of them, going to rest. Micah is saying that Moshe is intent on making it clear that there is to be equality, at least on Shabbat. Now, some people might argue, well, what's the point if it's only for 25 hours? No. We all are employees or employers, but it's the hope that if you realize that for 25 hours, hopefully will impact on you the way you treat your employee the 6 days of the week or the 5 days of the week, depending on where you live. But he's setting this up as a model of how society should be. Now, going back to the point about minimizing sacrifices. Look at these two words in Hebrew. And again, if you don't read Hebrew, you look at the letters and you can see how similar. So the word karban on the right, kuf resh bet nun, is sacrifice. And the word on the left, karov. So you see the shorish, the root, has that same kuf resh bet, means close. So what Micah explains is that we are dismissing the sacrifice. And so what's more important than giving that sacrifice to God is getting closer to people. And in fact, by getting closer to people, we are getting closer to God. That's his claim. And Danielle Hartman says that in a book we studied, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, the book that was called, anybody remember? I'll give you a cake. I'll order a cake from somewhere and get it to you by Shabbat. Putting God
In second place.
second. Okay, Bev, I'm going to have to find a way. Maybe by next Shabbat. Okay? Putting God second. Just as when Avram tells those 3 angels, he doesn't know they're angels, to wait. No, he tells God to wait so we can serve those 3 angels. God doesn't get upset because that's a way of being close to God, by being good to people. That's the Torah you want, Merle. Okay, now. Okay. All right, I have just 2 more little bits. I don't want to say who I feel like right now. Okay. So, I have to share 2 more things. This, I think 33-year-old, and he will not get older, with the guitar, is Rav Na'aran Eshachar, Zichrono Livracha. Just a couple of days ago, 1 week after his tank overturned up north, died of his wounds. Now, what makes him an amazing individual was he did not have to go in to the service, because only 4 months ago, he donated one of his kidneys to Yair Balul, the man that he's standing next to. And so he did not have to go in, but he insisted. Someone he did not know. Yeah. Anyway, and I have to share this with you. So most of the time when people, organizations send packages to the soldiers, we're encouraged to enclose notes. So this soldier is asking, saying, I am a fighter on the Gaza Strip, and in one of the cartons that we received, this brilliant letter was found. And if at all possible, could you find the child who wrote and drew this note? And the note says the following: Chayaleinu hayikarim, dear soldiers, ani ma'achel lachem, I'm wishing for you, shetagiu chazarim, that you will come back, viaviu robotim, and they will bring robots, sheyachlifu etchem, and they will bring robots instead of you. Va'atem tetzu lepensia, and you will be able to go out on pension. Aval ad shezeh yikre, but until that will happen, Ani sameach she'atem shomrim aleinu, I am happy that you are protecting us. Yeah. And that's what I have to tell you today.